Hello, this is Janet Gallen welcoming you to Love Letters Live. And today's guest is someone I have actually become dear friends with via Love Letters, Cynthia Toussaint. And she's going to talk about something really important. Everything she talks about is important. I want to do a quick little reminder to people who have not met you either in real life or any of the work you do or on Love Letters Live from a while ago, that Cynthia had put chronic pain on the map as a real medical problem. And it had been poo-pooed and ignored for so long. And she suffered it and stuck to it and created a whole world of comfort and help. But today we're going to talk about early trauma. Why don't you just start in, Cynthia? Go ahead, darling, you talk.
Okay, so it's not that hard to get me to talk, as you know, Janet.
I'm happy about that.
And I'm really, really happy to be here. And thank you for giving me this lovely, beautiful platform to talk about something besides pain, although pain is involved with trauma, very much so. And this, as you said, is a very, very important topic and something that we all need to know about because it might just change and even save our lives. Trauma is really the buzzword right now. It seems like whenever I turn on NPR, they're talking about trauma. There are a lot of movies being made about trauma. Robin Wright just made one. It's called Land. I haven't seen it yet. I hope everyone caught Promising Young Female. That's about trauma.
Is that something that we get streamed? We get on Netflix? Is it a documentary? What?
Promising Young Female was up for Best Picture, and you can get it on Netflix. And it's
behind the times.
It's incredible. Okay. Be prepared because it's tough. Okay. And it's also very much the Me Too movement. It's really extraordinary. There are a lot of documentaries being made. My wonderful partner, 40 years, John, and I just watched Tina, all about Tina Turner's life of trauma, young, old. She didn't even speak about her son recently committed suicide in a violent way. And she didn't talk about all of her illnesses. I just think there's too much for her to talk about, but she's really out there talking it up.
What made you decide that you needed to tell people about trauma? I'm guessing, I know from knowing you that you've had your own in life.
I've had lots.
Why don't you start with where you're coming from and just lead us up to what you want us to know?
Okay, so I have been really sick, as you were mentioning, for 38 years. And I actually got sick when I was only 12 years old. And you probably, maybe don't know this about me. I got anorexia when
I did not know that about you.
Yeah, and I was hospitalized and they saved my life. And then when I was 21 years old, I was a actor, singer, dancer, triple threat. And sadly, a ballet injury triggered a chronic pain disease called complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS. And this is considered the worst pain in the world. It's considered worse than childbirth. And we always have it. And I was bedridden for 10 years as a result. I couldn't speak for 5 of those years. And I still use a wheelchair for any distance. And now I have 19 comorbidities, like
I don't want to interrupt, but I don't want too much time to go by. When you say that you couldn't speak for 5 years, you're one of the most expressive people I know. Was that a physical disability, or were you so just disheartened that you couldn't bring yourself to speak?
Oh no, it was a physical disability. The crypts was in my throat and in my stomach, and I could not speak. I wrote on a board expressively. John and I made up our own sign language. I mean, those were the darkest days. But we got through them, anyway. Then I was mentioning comorbidities like lupus and MS, and it kind of goes on and on. But also mental, I would say, illness, including depression and anxiety, which it almost always goes with chronic pain. So that's important to remember. But then in 2019, I got a diagnosis that changed my life. I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. And as you might know, Janet, that's the most aggressive form of breast cancer. It's rare. And my doctors were trying to figure out how I got it. And they thought I would be BRCA positive. And so then when my genetic counselor called me and said, you're BRCA negative, you're negative for all of our genetic mutations. That being said, I can't explain your,
Yeah, so when,
your
what does that mean when they say that you're negative for all?
so it means that I
Just for
can't,
people who don't know.
I didn't get cancer from a genetic problem, a genetic mutation. So where did I get it? So she said, well, I can't explain how you have triple negative breast cancer. So that's when I went to my my pain doctor, who I just love. He's known me for about 20 years, and he's a board member of For Grace, and I adore this man. And I asked him the question, and he said, Cynthia, you've been trying to fix your dysfunctional family for your entire life, and the toll that that has taken on your body, that trauma is what gave you this illness, and it's what gave you all of your illnesses. And so that's when I decided to finally walk away from the very dysfunctional members of my family, the members I tried to fix my entire life.
Can you,
And
are you comfortable saying what kind of dysfunction it was? I don't want you to do anything that would make anyone uncomfortable, but
no, and I actually really
people who are listening, maybe they'll recognize themselves.
exactly. So I'm talking about divorce, a lot of domestic violence, suicide, alcoholism, a lot of mental illness, on
Okay.
and on, very severe trauma. And I realized after walking away from my family and then learning, I just started reading like crazy about trauma and learning, and I'm hosting a show now about trauma. And I mean, I'm always looking for the pieces of the pain puzzle. And I feel like trauma is not a piece. Trauma is the answer. It is the puzzle to illness.
What does that mean? Trauma is not.
So trauma, it leads to us, the person suffering trauma has a very high stress level. We're like in fight or flight almost all the time, you know, and that
Has something, that does something to your immune system and your ability to, okay, go ahead.
it does. I mean, it just kind of messes with everything. I mean, if you're chronically stressed, you're always in fight or flight, all these chemicals are rushing through your body that are only supposed to be there for a short period of time, you know, but they're there all the time. And it leads to autoimmune diseases. It leads to early death, stroke, heart disease, you know, I mean, basic cancer, pretty much everything, you know. So, I mean, we with trauma, we have to figure this out, and we have to find a way to make ourselves more well. And I actually have 4 different kinds of trauma in my life. I have generational trauma, which people.
What is that? Okay.
So that is like, it comes down from generations. Like on my dad's side of the family, what I know about is there was lots of alcoholism, lots of mental illness, lots of denial. It made me crazy being with that family. And just lots of affairs. It was just, everything was denial and illness. And then on my mom's side, I mean, it's like I could write a book about it. She was, her mother and father divorced, and then her mother had her father committed into an asylum, and she then had my mother kidnapped. And this is not a soap opera.
Goodness. Yeah.
No, and then she abandoned her other daughter, Grace, who I name all of my.
Oh, I never realized this.
Yeah, and Grace saved my mother, and because my mother was so abused. So Grace broke the cycle, but she paid a very high price. She died at age 20 of leukemia.
Oh.
And I'm always compared with Grace, and John and I wanted to have a little girl and name her Grace.
I never realized what your organization For Grace was. Oh.
Yeah, pretty, but she keeps me going. I feel the strength of her. Like I always feel like she's watching over me. Actually, one of my love letters will be to Grace.
Okay.
So then with generational trauma, it actually, we're born behind the 8 ball, and it changes our DNA, how our DNA expresses itself, and that's epigenetics, a science that people are talking about a lot now.
Outside of the genetic factor. Okay.
Exactly. And then another kind of trauma that I suffered, and a lot of people suffered, is called ACEs, or that stands for adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And there's actually an ACE test, which is so important that we get it in every school and every hospital setting, because we know how because we can actually cure it. But there's the ACE. Okay.
Too fast for me.
I know.
How do you test for it, and how do you cure it? And that I was going to ask, is there some way of getting in there early enough so that these traumas don't take a deadly hold?
Yes, exactly. And that's what a lot of people are working on right now. And the ACE test, hopefully at schools they give it. Hopefully when you take your child to their internist, they will give that test. At a lot of hospitals they are.
Really?
Yes, it is getting bigger.
How new is this? I mean, I never heard of it.
Oh gosh, I've heard of it, I would say probably for about maybe 7 years now.
That's
And I,
new.
yeah,
Okay.
and they ask like 10 questions, and like were you sexually assaulted as a child? Did your parents divorce? Did you see domestic violence? Things like that. Was a family member incarcerated? If you score 4 or higher, you're at very high risk of getting ill.
Oh, so I was going to ask that also, because I think almost every one of us can identify with some childhood trauma. I mean, when I was a child, divorce was, you weren't allowed to talk about it. You weren't allowed to
Oh,
talk about
I'm
anything.
sorry.
But alcoholism and divorce and sexual molestation, all these things,
Yes,
everybody suffered something. So if you could, so maybe the organism can handle a couple of them.
that's a really good point, Janet. But if you score 4,
Yeah,
that's a lot
that's
of
what you're
trauma.
saying. Yeah.
And I score 8 out of 10, which is kind
Oh,
of through the roof. It's just so high. I was obviously going to have illness.
yeah.
So that's really important. They turn it. I think I'm going to talk about turning around in a little bit, because I want to, if it's okay, I want to keep talking about my trauma.
All right, oh, go ahead.
Everybody's a trauma. So I also had in utero trauma. When I was in my mom's womb, my father was beating her up on a regular basis.
Oh, oh,
And so not only could I literally feel that that attack, but my mom was in a toxic stress. She was releasing all kinds of bad chemicals in her body, and therefore they were in my system. So I was really born behind the 8 ball there. So it all puts us at higher risk of developing illness later. And another thing that the last kind of trauma that I still deal with it's called ongoing trauma. And it's because I have a very toxic family, and because I would say my dysfunction was, I always thought I can fix them. I can do all the cooking, I can do all the cleaning. When dad committed suicide violently I was age 8, and I thought I can fix my 4 siblings and my mother,
yeah.
so that's that's such a toxic thing to go through. And even after letting go, it's sort of my brain's in a loop. It gets into kind of a loop of, I remember sort of the assaults, and they still hurt me. So that's ongoing. And I hope that's all the kinds of trauma that you can have. I feel like I've had most of them, if not all of them.
That's
And
absolutely enough.
I've had enough. It's time to move on.
And
But
as
I've
you say, it's a bad combination generally,
generation.
generationally. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the whole thing is about it breaking the cycle. And there's so many ways that we can actually turn trauma around.
Okay,
And
let's have it.
I know we want
Talk
to get
about that, right?
So
Right.
the most important thing is that we catch people early and young, and the better chance you have at turning it around if you catch people young. And there's a great book called The Deepest Well. Her last name is Harris Burke. And anyway, she talks all about ACEs. She's not our California's Attorney General. I can't remember her title.
Okay.
But she's an Attorney General. So I think I got that right. But she talks all about turning it around. If you want to really learn about how to do it, I would strongly suggest reading The Deepest Well. And her last name is Burke Harris. And she talks about having a buffer. I mean, first of all, we have to be aware of trauma, and we have to recognize it in the child. And then we have to have a buffer. It could be another parent or a parent. It could be an aunt. It could be a teacher. It could be a counselor, somebody who really cares about that kid. And can work with psychologists and talk it through. And we have to remember that if we're really young dealing with trauma, it's while our bodies and most importantly, our brains are being formed, and our brains actually form incorrectly. And so it's really important. John goes crazy because he and my therapist will tell me something over and over, but because my brain is formed incorrectly, I take things like I'll be real emotional about things, but I won't think real logically about them because I get triggered,
Sure.
sort of incorrectly due to the way that my brain is formed. So we want to make sure for kids that we can turn it around for them.
Could I ask you a question about turning it around for children? I know from my own experience in a variety of, I used to be a juvenile probation officer. And
Wow.
I know how hard it is in general. I mean, you see this all over really, how hard, almost impossible it is for a young child to be able to say, I'm being abused, because nobody wants to be able, it's hard to be able to say, I'm the kind of person that somebody wants to hurt. You can't do that. So you protect against it. No?
That's really interesting. You're talking about the shame and stigma.
Yes.
And that's a really good point, Janet. And that's something that we have to work through.
And especially with towards people on whose lives you are dependent for your own survival. Not to
Exactly.
mention, you cannot
Right.
see yourself as a hated person. Oh, I'm going to cry.
Well, and we have to survive. And I'm actually like, I'm going to get into like, if we're older, like myself, and we learn about this trauma and that it's really hurting us. There are a lot of things that we can do. One of them is called EMDR, which I'm doing. But just, I want to mention that talk therapy helps some people. Cognitive behavioral therapy helps somebody. I've not done that. Something called myofascial release really helps some people. I just interviewed somebody. I know all these, but at least we know that there are therapies out there that we can look up and learn about. Also, it's really important that we have healthy lifestyle, that we make healthy lifestyle choices and habits, and people don't take that seriously enough. It can, I mean, if you've heard of telomeres, and we have to have long telomeres,
Yes.
they lengthen if we
And the
exercise.
nerve ending, yes.
Exactly. So, I mean, I'm getting more technical, but I mean,
Well, people can go Google it and look it up and learn something.
Exactly. Yeah. We need to sleep 8 hours. We need to do that. We need to exercise every day. We have to move. We have to eat a healthy diet. We need to stress management. We need to have really great stress management in order for our brains, if they've developed incorrectly, they'll function better, even if we've never had trauma. It's a good thing to do. And also that will lessen all the really negative chemicals in
Okay,
our
I have another question that's, you're gonna have to come back because there's gonna be more to talk about. Will you come back another time?
Of course I will. Are you kidding me?
I hate to be time limited, but I do have a question about you in particular. I've known you for many years now. I have seen you at a couple of your lowest, most difficult, painful, threatening, frightening moments.
Wow.
Yeah, I have. I mean, when you think about over what, like 10 years or whatever it is that we've, and somehow you have the most remarkable facility for, see that smile, that, and also for making other people, in the midst of your own anguish, you have a way of making other people feel graceful and important. And I am guessing that with all the trauma that you talk about and all the genetic horror that you have been unfortunately forced to face,
Yes.
you got one heck of a good disposition from someone. I mean, do you believe in that genetic gift of?
I do. With the EMDR work that I'm doing.
Yes.
I asked this Kathy, who's my practitioner, like, why am I so positive? Why am I the functional one? Why do I choose to think, not drink? And she said, I think you just got lucky genetically.
Okay, because I think there is something to that.
I think I got it from my mother. Also, I have this incredible mother, and she now has advanced Alzheimer's.
Oh, yes.
But she's still incredible. And I don't know, I learned from her beautiful example. And
Okay.
yeah, I think I love to make people feel good. It's very natural. I love to smile. I chose a wonderful partner,
Didn't you?
John,
Yeah.
very functional. And actually he comes from a great deal of trauma as well. And we've learned that that was part of the attraction, and that we saw that in each other. We were both the fixers. And so I think that's really interesting, but it feels good to smile. I mean, we make a choice. We can either, say hello and with a grimace and be down, or say hello with a big smile and make everybody feel good. And smiling makes us feel good too, right?
Well, I've heard that the very act of those muscles, but also it's a very powerful thing. It's like an area that you can have total power, even in a life where you are being made powerless in certain ways. You have the power to make other people feel wonderful. That's huge.
That's a really good point. And I have the power to make myself feel wonderful. And that's, I mean, we choose how to react, right? I mean, we can just go nuts if something goes bad and get upset, or we can really make a mindful decision and think about it and stay calm. I meditate every day, which really helps me stay strong. And I don't know, for me, facing everything, being a truth teller is huge, because I always know that I get to help people.
And you get to encourage other people to tell the truth and not be frightened by it,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. And then people tell me how much it helps them. So that another thing I want to mention, I don't know if we have time, but
Go ahead, because
I
then I want
want
to
to
ask
go
you about a
into,
love letter. Yes, go ahead.
oh yeah, okay, cool. So I want to just say EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I said that wrong. But it's so cool because I'm working with Kathy on, literally, I will relive my traumas, and one at a time, and I'll move my eyes to her fingers. And it's so painful to let go of trauma, but I feel so much better afterward.
It's painful to let go because you're used to having that identity as the person who has suffered that, or why?
No, it's actually physically painful, emotionally painful too. You go through a lot of grieving, you go through rage, a lot of,
How is it physically painful?
oh my gosh, it feels like literally like my face is going to explode, and I want to look away and make it stop. But I'm told that it's just as painful to let trauma go as to when you first take it in. But when you let it go, it's gone. And also I work a lot with my inner child, and I need her to tell me about the repressed memories so that I can then relive them with Kathy and let them go and be free and be healthy.
You set
So
yourself a complicated task from a complicated variety of troubles.
exactly, it is. And I'm actually releasing trauma, what I'm understanding, I'm releasing trauma from before I was even verbal, because of the way I responded. The head's going to explode, and then I get so tired, like I can't even lift my.
Well, that was so interesting to me. I never thought of it before, but when you talked about your father beating your mother while she was of course that little thing feels it.
So people don't think of that. Yeah, about what come on, little beings in tummies, or little kids. I mean, I go crazy now when I see anyone abusing their child. And so
Oh,
does
I
John.
know,
We're
I
similar
know.
to a trauma, and we know what's going to happen.
Right.
And we want that buffer in there to help them, and we need to get trauma all over the place. So I'm excited. It's a time of learning. And I'm actually about to interview somebody. Her name is Diana Whitney. I'm looking at her book. I'm reading it. It's called "You Don't Have to Be Everything Huge." I mean, it's just getting rave reviews. And she gave me a quote that I love. And she said, "The firstborn daughter often carries what remains unresolved in the mother."
Oh,
And Grace and I
sure.
are the firstborn, and we both broke the cycle. And it's a painful thing to do. And Grace paid with her life, and I almost died when I was 12. And then, I was suicidal due to depression and all of this pain for a long
Well,
time.
I want you to come back for another, because you and I talked about For Grace ages ago.
We
And
did. I remember that day.
but it was so long ago. It'd be nice if we did another one
I would love to
where
do
you
that.
could, I know it'll be repeating yourself, but you'll be able to talk to, what about your love letter? You know I'm going to ask about that.
So I have two. So I want to write to my inner child, and I want to thank her for keeping me alive and for keeping me from looking at what was too overwhelming. Because CRPS is actually, it's a buffer to pain that's actually worse. And she kept me from looking at that so that I could survive. And I want to thank her for that, but tell her that she can lay down her burden now,
Oh,
and she can give it to me. And because I'm with Kathy, now I can get well together with Kathy, that I'm safe. I need her to know that I'm safe and that I love her.
okay.
That
So
she's,
here's the issue. I think, with love letters, where are you going to mail it? Because you know me, I like it showing up in somebody's mailbox.
that's interesting.
Okay, I have a thought.
What's your thought? I was thinking Kathy.
Oh, yes. Well, you could do one to Kathy and say, dear Grace, I'm writing this to you, but I'm going to send it to Kathy. But also, I was one to send a copy to yourself. Grace, care of Cynthia, your address, and you can open it and read it, and you'll find that the you who wrote it's different than the you who's reading it. It's good. It's a shocker. But also, do you have an archive section of For Grace?
Yes.
So then you can put it there so that this letter will just last for, God willing, generations.
I love
You
that.
do all that?
Yes, and I want to do, and I also want to send a letter to Grace. And
Yeah.
I want to tell her that I never got to meet her, but she's saved my life. She's the reason that I'm here, really, because
You
she saved
never
my,
got to meet her.
Grace died way before I was ever born. She was
Oh,
only
I didn't
20.
realize that part. I
I
didn't.
never knew her, but I'm always compared with her. I mean, we look similar. We have similar personalities. We both broke the trauma cycle. She
Okay,
died from
well, then
trauma.
that definitely goes in the For Grace archives.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that's brilliant, Janet. And I never thought of it. I needed you to tell me that.
Because
And I want to
people,
thank her
people
for
can go to
saving
your For Grace website, and if it says I don't know if it says archives with photographs or letters or, okay, good.
Oh, we'll figure this out because this
Yes,
is
you
really
will.
great. And what a beautiful thing, because For Grace was named after Grace. So I need to write to her and thank her for saving my mom. And as a result, I get to be here and I get to enjoy this beautiful life. And it is a beautiful life, Janet. It's so beautiful.
I want to thank you for doing this with me. I'm going to go just have a cup of hot tea and some morphine. Just
I'm sorry. Next time we'll talk about all good stuff.
okay, and no. It's by the way, I think there's beauty in talking about the not good stuff.
I agree.
I have a friend who only wants to talk about fun things, and I want to tell you, no, because talking truth is fun, even when it's painful.
Yeah, and there we have different friends for different things. And I love to talk about. I love to SNL, my favorite show. I love to laugh and talk about nothing except makeup. You know what I mean? I love to do that. And then I love to talk about the serious stuff too. And this is my life too. So it's important. And I'm getting more well every single day.
Oh, I'm so happy. Thank you, sweetheart, for doing this with me. And let's talk, because I would love you to go into depth about your, I mean, from the leg up on the ballet bar to the pain to the entire journey again.
Okay.
I would listen to it myself again and be strengthened by it. So, all right, I will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Janet. What a pleasure. What an honor to be here. I love you.
I look forward to, this pandemic being over and that we get to travel a little bit and see each other in person.
See each other in person. I can't wait to see you. It's been way too long.
It has. All right, a kiss to John for me and 100 of them from me to you. And
Okay.
I will talk to you later.
Okay, looking forward to it, sweetheart. Thank you.
Thank you, honey. Bye.
Bye.